I don't think there's a reason to transition if you don't have a mental illness. Like, there's something wrong in
That's
your
like
brain.
saying you shouldn't cut your hair because you don't
No.
want long hair.
Wow, that is so not a comparison.
So when you
on topic.
I mean when it's the opposite concept of gender or body dysmorphia. So when you look in the mirror and you see what's wrong with, like, you have an uncomfortability with your secondary sex characteristics, and so the treatment is to change that to match with what you want it to be. But I mean, he's right. You can't change your sex. But it's in the brain. You treat the body to help the brain. Guess who did another one? Jubilee Part 2. Welcome back to the channel today, everyone. So yes, I am in a second Jubilee video, and so I want to talk about the second one. So first thing is that we actually filmed both episodes back to back. So the crazy one with Blair White and Blossom and everybody else was filmed right before this episode. So you can imagine it was a pretty exhausting day. And so by the time we got to this one, I was tired. And not only because of the shoot and how exhausting that was, but we were also on, I'm in the East Coast. They're in California, so the time zone changes and everything like that, they make it a little bit difficult to get used to just over the course of like one night, right? So I will say I'm happy with my performance in both of these episodes. And I will admit that some of my answers are kind of the same for both. I mean, one of the prompts was exactly the same, but what I noticed is they used, I think they used different quotes that I was saying in the second video, and I'll get to that a little bit because I do think the second one was actually more edited than the first one, and I guess that's because I think we were there again for another 4 hours to shoot, maybe 3 to shoot. I don't remember exactly how long it was. I just know the total time that I was there, and I will say that there was actually more in this second video that I said that I can just clearly remember saying and that kind of got cut. And some of them were some good zingers. Like, I'll kind of explain that coming up pretty soon, but I'm kind of disappointed that some of the stuff was edited out, but I get it. Normally these videos are an hour long. The last one that we did was an hour and a half, and like I said, that was like the longest that Jubilee's ever done, and then they still did a 2-hour unedited cut, or extended cut on their Patreon channel. So I get why they have to cut so much down and why so much of this was cut out, but there was some stuff that I wish I would have been in there, but it is what it is. I still want to say that I do think that my performance, same as the first one, everything I said, like, my point got across. There was just some stuff that I kind of do wish was in there a little bit. Now, this video is actually going to have as little clips from the episode as possible, trying not to get a copyright violation on this one again. Now, like my last video, so the last video, if you don't know, Jubilee was basically issuing copyright, so they were executing copyright, which doesn't mean I got a strike, so there was nothing like put against my channel like a copyright strike, but any money that I would have made off of it for ad revenue was actually going to Jubilee, so y'all know how that works. So any of your super stickers and super chats and all that stuff is always greatly appreciated to kind of help cover that cost, because especially if this one does get copyrighted as well, it is what it is, but that's what it is, right? So first thing I kind of want to point out, this was a very uncomfortable set for me, but for completely different reasons than the other debate. Like, we saw what happened on camera with the other debate. That was uncomfortable for its own reasons. I want to point out there's this person, Arthur, who is on technically my team. And I've seen a lot of the comments talking about Arthur and how I had to sit there and basically listen to his homophobia, transphobia, and all this other stuff, and how it was kind of dehumanizing the way that, the other two were kind of speaking about trans people when I'm sitting right there and I am silent about it. So the thing about Arthur, I didn't know he was going to be there, But Arthur and his friends are basically online trolls, and they've kind of been harassing and stalking me online for over a year now. So it was very awkward to be on his side. And to say the least, I don't agree with a lot of what he says or what he's saying or what he's doing, especially in this video. And there's times where you can actually see in the video, I draw back. If you look at my body language, I look over at, the left side, and I'm just like, there's times where I'm shaking my head, like I don't agree with this at all. I don't know what to say. Because the way that this was set up, it's not like it was the way that the whole debate was set up. We weren't really there to argue with our team. We're trying to win people over to our side. And it really was not set up to be conducive for a big, long debate in general. But there was plenty of times where I'm like, what are you doing? What are you talking about? But I will say, I do think that when it was my turn to speak, I said something, and he may have completely disagreed with it without overtly saying I completely disagree with that, right? So you can hear me talking about body dysmorphia and gender dysphoria, which he was confusing at one point, and I talk about the difference is between the two, and then he conflates the two. So there's those types of things if you actually you look into it and see. And I think a lot of the comments kind of saw some of this stuff too, right? And then there was times like he just wanted to fight and argue even with the undecided people. From the very first prompt, Arthur went after the undecided person, talking about the celebrity, which I could tell you who the celebrity is. I think it's very well, you know who it is. It's the biggest name celebrity out there. I don't know why Jubilee wanted to censor it, but because they did, I will censor it as well. But he was just trying to fight with them. And then there was a time, I believe this was cut out of the episode, where Arthur was frustrated with the people on the undecided group, and he yelled at them like, I just told you that. Why don't you understand? Like, he was basically berating the undecided group because they had questions or they disagreed with his opinion. And they cut that out. I don't blame them for cutting it out, but it really would just show just how even worse he was in this debate. But again, Jubilee's a left-wing organization, and that would have made Arthur look pretty bad, in my opinion. I think most people would have seen that as well. But in regards to what the prompt, the time where they did show, if you've been following me, I will use the pronouns that you present as generally. And if I don't really respect you, I will still use your name out of respect, because I feel like needlessly misgendering somebody and being mean is not how you actually win people over to your side. And I do feel like that is the goal, is to actually win people to see your point of view. And that was definitely the goal in this video. And so I understand why some people purposely misgender. I don't do it for specific reasons, because I do feel that once you misgender somebody, once you basically disrespect them, people's ears turn off, right? So they stop listening, the conversation's over, and you've basically lost that person, and they may never come around to see your side. And you can't kind of move the needle on culture unless you're thinking about using force, unless you win people to your side. So that's why. But it's pretty clear to me that people like Arthur don't actually want to influence anyone. They are basically hammers, and everything they see is a nail. They just want to hit and hammer and try to force their opinion on everybody, and everybody to believe their opinion. It's pretty ironic when Arthur continued to say he, or even I get this all the time on Twitter, right? To where, if I use somebody's preferred pronouns online, inevitably somebody on the right wing will say it's he for somebody that's a trans woman. And I'm just like, the people who want to compel speech, or the people who don't want you to compel speech, are now actively trying to compel your speech. And that's exactly what Arthur did, when that's exactly the opposite of what they want to happen to them. It's just really interesting how these types of things work out, right? And I do just want to point out that the organization that Arthur works for is the Mass Resistance Organization, and they are admittedly homophobic. Like, look at this tweet. If you look at this tweet and you think, I mean, it's admittedly homophobic. So to think that I would want to be on that person's side is astronomical. And I do want to note for my friends out there, if you have any concerns about something like this happening, like you have people that are like this in your life, and like Jubilee comes and asks you if you want to take part in one of these debates and you are concerned, I would say make it known during the screening process that there are people that you would definitely not want to be on set with. It probably would have changed my opinion on going on there beforehand. But what I will say is Arthur didn't say a single word to me on or off camera the entire time we were in person. He did subsequently go on to Twitter and then say something negative about me. And honestly, just speaking about this now, I'm giving him too much satisfaction. I'm giving him too much of my time worrying about this type of stuff. This is the only time I've ever spoke about it publicly. I'm done talking about these people. They mean nothing to me. You, my audience, the people that have supported me, you're what I care about. You're why I do this. I don't think those people move the needle at all. Because I will tell you, out there, both of these Jubilee debates, I've been seeing how what I do has been red pilling people that have been normally liberals. And so what I'm doing is working, and I don't believe what they're doing is. And you can see that again in the comment section of both of these videos and how the liberals and even the extreme right act. They're not moving people over. What's interesting about this episode, the three people on the other side, the liberal side, I think they're incredibly misguided, but they were actually very pleasant. I had no issues with anybody on the other side. In fact, me and Tammy, the mom on the other side, we had a wonderful conversation after this ended. Like, it probably lasted 20 to 30 minutes, and like, I gave her a hug, and she noted, like, we probably agree on a lot of issues. But out of respect for her, I won't tell you much about what our conversation was. Just, I don't want, out of respect for her. She was a very sweet lady, and that's all I can say. And I think that comes across on camera as well. I just think they're incredibly misguided, but it was nice to have that type of conversation with people who are rational, reasonable, calm, and we can actually have important conversations like this. So it was kind of a breath of fresh air to see that coming out of the left, right? And really, what I told her was nothing that I haven't told y'all, and how I really feel about parents. I told her that I feel most parents out there are put into an impossible situation, especially when doctors are giving them this false dichotomy that you can either have a trans child or a dead child, and that's just not true. And I do believe, and I didn't even catch it when I watched it back, but I do believe that and it might not have even been in the episode, but I do believe she said her children were both adults when they medically transitioned. They socially transitioned young, but they were adults. I also told her, like, there's a small minority of parents that have the equivalent of Munchausen by proxy, and they make all parents who are in that situation look bad. And I want to remind you of what Chloe Cole told another mom during a congressional hearing.
Mrs. Reynolds.
And you can direct it to me and say that what Ms. Reynolds talked about you want to respond to, and you go ahead.
Well, I understood that Mrs. Reynolds is scared for her child. And I just want to set the record straight that I don't hate her. I don't think anybody in this room hates her. In fact, I see my own mother and my own father in her, and that she dearly loves her child, and she's doing the best with what she's been given. And unfortunately, it's not much. And for that, I'm sorry. I mean, I think every parent deserves the utmost grace and guidance with how to help their child. That being said, I don't wish for her child to have the same result as I did. I don't wish for anybody to regret transition or to detransition because it's incredibly difficult. It comes with its own difficulties, and it's not easy. And I hope that her child gets to have a happy and fulfilling adulthood, however that may look like.
See, we don't hate these people. We just hope their children don't have to go through what Chloe did. I know we harp on trans housing moms, but I do think that most of these parents need compassion, and like Tammy. I think that she needs compassion because she was put into an impossible situation with her kids. I think it's a little bit odd, maybe social contagion aspect of it, where one children transitions and then the other one then also says that they're trans. Possibly to be like the older one. Maybe the older one does have dysphoria and the second one was like, oh, hey, I want to be like my older sibling. That can happen, but she might be, they may actually both be trans. And I honestly, I don't hope that they're not trans at this point if they've already started medicalizing. That's what I want to say. Also, the other two were very kind as well. Honestly, they were maybe too kind for this type of debate, especially me coming off such a combative debate. And I was ready to take this one over. Though I was exhausted from the first episode, I was also hungry. So I was very hangry. Now, disclaimer, I will say Jubilee did feed me because I was there for so long. But I really couldn't eat much because the adrenaline had killed my appetite during the first episode. And so I was still very hungry by the time I got done with it. But let's talk about the debate itself. It was a much different format. It was set up more to say your piece, not as much of a back and forth, though there was some, but there wasn't a whole lot of conversation. Like I said earlier, there was a lot I wanted to respond to, but I couldn't. It was also odd because I couldn't just like outright call out my team either. Like it wasn't a rule per se, but like I said earlier, what I did was kind of contradict the points made by my side that I didn't agree with. I added my own nuance where it was lacking, but there was a lot of times that I think that in a normal common ground format, I would have been able to speak up against people like Arthur, like my team, for what they were saying because I disagreed with what they were saying. And it was like when I talked about dysphoria being like dysmorphia, like I mentioned earlier, and the other two saying dysphoria is basically a delusion.
There's a problem, there's a mental health issue that the person has. It's a disorder, it's a break from reality. That's just a fact. The person is born male or female and thinks that they should be something else. Now, regardless of how that one treats that, the fact is, and I would submit, even from the comments from the liberal side, they recognize that it's an illness that needs to be treated.
I recognize that it needs treating, but it's not a break from reality. That's
Yes,
a
it is.
psychosis.
A psychosis is a break from reality.
Exactly.
Let her talk. Arthur, let him talk.
A psychosis is a break from reality.
Which is a mental illness.
Gender dysphoria is not a psychosis.
But it is a break from reality because the person thinks they should be something else.
I think it's pretty clear. It's a disconnect between reality. You're born male, you're born female, but then your brain is saying something else. You know, I was born male or female, but something deep down, something in me is I'm actually this. I'm actually this. Reality is what is physical. And so if you are physically or biologically male or female, you don't need to change your body, you need to change what you're thinking.
Okay, let's go.
I rejected that notion, as I said. It's the opposite concept of gender or body dysmorphia. So when you look in the mirror and you see what's wrong with, like you have an uncomfortability with your secondary sex characteristics. And so the treatment is to change that to match with what you want it to be. But I mean, he's right, you can't change your sex. But it's in the brain. You treat the body to help the brain. It's not a psychosis, and the other two's premise is completely wrong. And it is a mental disorder, But it also sounds a little bit like conversion therapy when the one person, I forget his name, when he says you need to change what you are thinking. Like you can just change what you're thinking and opt out of having gender dysphoria. Doesn't really work like that. It doesn't. It does sound like you are advocating for something along the lines of conversion therapy, like actual conversion therapy, not what like the left thinks is conversion therapy, and actually trying to figure out if you're trans or not, but actual conversion therapy. You can't just change your mind and like opt out of it. Trust me, I tried for 28 years of my life, and it doesn't work. But I will also say the trans man on the other side, he kind of threw the whole debate when he said,
I'm always going to go on personal experience before I go on stats because there are too many trans people specifically who don't get accounted into those statistics. So it's hard for me to be like, yes, this number and yes, this number. Whatever. But
your experience is not everyone's experience, and things change. And if you are going to argue for something, it better be what is happening now, not what it was like. And I believe it was cut when he also said he was no longer on testosterone because of the side effects, while also advocating that minors can consent to those side effects. Also, the one thing that bugs me about both debates after watching them is how we let the other side kind of get away with doctors being predatory because we have a for-profit healthcare system. This is such an invalid argument to make. Like, do they not think doctors are motivated by money in countries with universal healthcare? Do they not think doctors get paid per procedure? Well, no, actually, they don't think that. Like, his argument at this point was, my costs were almost nothing, so the doctors don't have any financial gain, but his insurance company paid for it.
And as far as cost goes, my insurance covered everything.
But they are still getting paid. Just the government or somebody else is paying them.
I mean, in comparison to a BBL, yeah.
Well, yeah. But they're still getting paid and they're still getting financial.
So this obviously shows how people think about, other people making money when insurance or government pays for something. In fact, under taxpayer-funded programs, the incentive is probably worse because the doctors know they are going to get paid because the government is actually funding it. I mean, let's listen to this Vanderbilt clip again.
According to the Affordable Care Act, insurance carriers are mandated to cover medical expenses for trans folks. It's a lot of money. These surgeries make a lot of money. So female to male chest reconstruction can bring in $40,000. A patient just on routine hormone treatment, who I'm only seeing a few times a year, can bring in several $1,000s because that requires a lot of visits and labs. It actually makes money for the hospital.
She specifically says that because Obamacare mandates insurance providers to pay for the service, they can charge more and they will make more money. That is a failure in the government program. Like, it's also pretty indicative to see how they will say this and then not understand. It's not, as long as it's paid for, they don't understand where that money is coming from. The money comes from somewhere. It's not free. And when we start to talk about like college should be free or free healthcare, it's obviously they never learn the idea that there's no such thing as a free lunch. The money comes from somewhere. Somebody's paying for it. But they don't have to worry about that, so they just don't even think, do they not think doctors are getting paid? Like in any of these systems, doctors are going to get paid. And like I said, it's worse under universal healthcare. But the thing about it is a universal healthcare system is actually worse for trans people, right? It hurts actual trans people because what happens is the trenders make the wait time so much longer. And now that may be a good thing depending on the way you look at it because it gives people more time to think about it. But the fact is, no matter the system, the healthcare industry gets paid. And so it's really not an excuse to say that because we live in a for-profit healthcare system, that is why doctors would be more predatory in their practices towards trans people. And it's actually why I think are going to be the only way to really end this and the whole thing de-incentivizing it. In places where they have universal healthcare and stuff like that, they've already started shutting it down because these procedures are now too expensive for them to provide. So you can take that any way you want. So they've actually started to limit the number of people that can transition. So they've strengthened their guidelines. If you think that everybody should be allowed to transition if they want, then you would not want a universal healthcare system. You'd want a free market system without government interference. I'm just saying. Like I said, I do think that this episode was a little bit worse for editing, at least for me. Like there was a point where I made a point about the kids that were now are doing so to gain community. They're not necessarily the most popular ones, and so that's why they're transitioning, is to actually gain that community. That's when Tammy interjected, and she basically said, "Excuse me, my kids are very popular," to which I responded, "Yeah, now they are, because this is a way to gain popularity," and it was in the very first prompt. And like I said, I didn't see it in there. I didn't catch it when I was watching, but it was a good point. It was a good zinger, good shot back. They edited that out, and it would have, I think it really strengthened the point that I was trying to make in that situation. But it was still a good episode. Y'all should definitely go watch. It's going to be linked in the description below. Let me know what y'all think in the comment section. Please subscribe and follow me across all social media platforms, and I will see you next time.